Thank you, Yossi, and welcome to all. Welcome to the Rose Stark Alaha Shalom Memorial event. The event is named for my mother, Alaha Shalom. My name is Dr. Michlalah-Jerusalem. I'm head of the English department at Michlalah-Jerusalem College, and I will be the moderator of this event. Now, this is the 14th year, if I've done my math right, that we've been meeting like this. In our first years, my mother, an Auschwitz survivor, would join us and share her stories. Stories of the vibrant city of Munkach, where she grew up. The story of the night that shattered her family, the night she arrived in Auschwitz. She entered those ominous gates with her young husband, Yossi, her baby, Shlomo Nuchum, her parents, Yisrael Moshe and Malka, her parents-in-law, 3 sisters, Surah, Faiga, and Ganessa, and their extended families. Hashem Yikom Damam. She came out of Auschwitz a year later, alone with only her faith to give her the strength to rebuild her life and to rebuild a family. In the last years before she passed away, when speaking was getting hard for her, my mother would still come, and if she couldn't tell her story, she would always give her bracha. The last year that she came, she was in a wheelchair, hooked up to oxygen. And after the Patira, the event was named in her memory. So somebody asked before, is this her yahrzeit? It's not her yahrzeit. This is just the time of year we always do our evening, but we felt that she had given enough to those evenings that the evening should be. I keep saying evening. I'm sorry if you're in America, Canada, for you it's the afternoon. I'm used to doing this in the evenings, but the event is now in her memory. Now, my mother would always begin her talk the same way. She would say, thank you. Thanks. Thank you, she would say, to the chushava audience. Okay, and for those who don't know what chushava means, I guess it means respected, but it works better in Yiddish. Thank you to the chushava audience for taking the time to come and taking the time to remember. So of the innumerable lessons I have learned from my mother, one is to start by thanking you all for coming. Special thanks to the Michlalah Machal girls, our gap year students who are in an auditorium in Michlalah. I'm in Beit Shemesh, incidentally. I'm not in Yerushalayim. But to thank them, especially after a long day of learning, they are still coming to remember. And thank you to all the SEM girls and yeshiva guys. We've got a number of SEMs and yeshivas who have signed up for this evening, who are also watching by Zoom. One important goal of our event is to teach and more to engage and inspire younger people who with each passing year have less and less direct connection to the Shoah and to survivors. Thanks to all of you, those of you who are in Israel tuning in after a long day, those of you who are in Chutz La'aretz, perhaps taking time off from your busy afternoons. Truly, you are a chushava audience. Now we have a very full program tonight. This is the first time we've organized the evening through Zoom. The good news is that means we have people watching from all over the world. We went to the list today. All right. I expected America and Canada. We've got Hungary, Slovakia, Germany, Brazil, and one person from Tunisia. So welcome to all from all over the world. And we have speakers from all over the world. So that's the good news with Zoom. The less good news with Zoom is anyone who knows Zoom knows there's something called Zoom fatigue, which in Yiddish, such an expressive language, it says, "Oh, ich bin so ausgezoomt." Zoom is a little bit tiring, but we have. I've been teaching on Zoom now for a year now. I've learned some strategies, and that includes moving around. Feel free, get up, stretch, walk around, move your head, roll your eyes. That will keep you from Zoom fatigue. But do stay on to the end because we have a really powerful program planned for you tonight. And to open that program, I am honored to invite Dr. Dvorah Rosenwasser. Dr. Rosenwasser is the Dean of Michlalah. She has some other titles at Michlalah also, but really what she is the heart and the soul of Michlalah-Jerusalem. So Dvorah, I'll give you the unmute.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I was telling my students yesterday that this is one of my favorite events every year. I will not miss it for the world. One year I missed it when I was sitting Shiva, but otherwise this is so important for me. I can't tell you. I find this evening every year very spiritually uplifting. very intellectually stimulating, and obviously emotionally moving. And I remember last year, I just landed. There were planes those days. Last year, I landed in the airport. I put my suitcases in a taxi. I said, go to Michlalah. I put all my suitcases by the guard. With my shmates, I came in because I said, I'm not missing this event. And I really, really just want to say thank you for Dr. Emi Zitter for organizing it, and Rebbetzin Farbstein. And I remember Mrs. Stark fondly. She used to talk to me every time like I'm her best friend. I think that was everybody felt like oh, and how are you, and this, and brachos, and with the oxygen and everything. What a powerful person. So I would just want to wish us a wonderful evening, a beautiful Purim, which is around the corner. And we read 2 weeks ago about Amalek, the first time in the Torah. We're going to read about the other Amalek in Megillah Esther. And today we're going to discuss the modern Amalek. And in Mirza Hashem, we shall just continue seeing Nissim, Gedolim. We can use a lot of Nissim, because I was just thinking that Purim is the antithesis to social distancing. I mean, Purim, we have to have Sudas Purim, and we have to give Shalach Manos, and we have to give Matanot Levionim, and Purim, Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be together. It's like a very Achdus Yontef. And here, under the circumstances, obviously we'll do whatever we have to do, because the most important thing, we should all be healthy. But Kadosh Baruch Hu can do anything. Maybe by Purim, in Mirza Hashem, this virus will be gone, and we'll only be able to celebrate together and really thank Kadosh Baruch Hu for all the Nissim He's doing for us daily. So enjoy your evening. I'm so happy to see so many familiar faces and non-familiar faces. And thank you, Rabbi Krohn. Okay, we had already many events we shared together, and I'm so happy to have you, Michlalah, in one form or another. Thank you again, everybody, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Devorah. Thank you very much, especially for your warm words about my mother, Allah Shalom. It means a lot. Now, if you've been to a Holocaust museum, including Yad Vashem, which is right sort of down the block from Michlalah, if you've been to a study day, to a conference, or you've taken a course about the Holocaust, about the Shoah, that stressed not just the physical resistance of Jews during the Holocaust, but their spiritual resistance, their spiritual courage, you can thank Rabbanit Rebbetzin Esther Farbstein, the founder and head of Michalah's Center for Holocaust Studies. Rebbetzin Farbstein was a pioneer on the focusing of the spiritual dimension of Holocaust resistance, and that has become part of the general understanding, the general conversation about the Shoah. In her writings and her teaching, she combines an incredible academic rigor with equally incredible neshama. And I don't know how to translate neshama. She speaks and writes and teaches from the heart. Her latest book is called Tal Shel Tchiyah. It's not a Dew of Revival in English, not yet translated, but we have hopes. And it concerns letters of Shoah survivors that they wrote immediately after the Shoah. Now, Esther will be speaking in Hebrew. Don't panic, the rest of the evening is in English. But if you know Hebrew, enjoy hearing words in Lashon HaKodesh, from Ir HaKodesh, and from a woman who has dedicated her life to Avodat HaKodesh. Esther, bavakasha.
שלום לכולם, ערב טוב מירושלים, תודה רבה על ההשתתפות היוצאת מן הכלל. תודה לאמי המסורה לזיכרון של השואה, והמסורה גם לזיכרון של אמא שלה היקרה עליה השלום. אמי, אמרת שאני אדבר בעברית, אבל אני רוצה גם לנסות לומר כמה מילים באנגלית.
Yeah, okay.
Let's try to speak a little bit in English. In our Siddur, we find special tefillot for each day, for each event in our life, and for each period. What's more moving these days than the tefillot, רפאנו השם ונרפא, הושיענו ונבשע. Let's note that we have two requests here regarding our health. We use two verbs, two concepts, רפאנו, הושיענו. Why? The Meforshim explain that Refaenu touches on the healthing of the body. Hoshienu v'nevashea is related to the healthing of the soul, of the neshama, as you said, Amy. These two things are, of course, connected. One goes with the other. Hence, also in the brachot of Kriyat Shema, we say, Boreh refuot and Matzmiach yeshuot. In this amazing tefillot, we can see how the tefillot is very actual in our day. In our situation, we think about physical health and see clearly what means boreh refuot, but at the same time, we ask that our souls, our neshamas remain intact, that the children's education will be maintained, that people will stay mentally healthy, strong in their faith in God, ready to stand up to the challenges of the time. And this is our tefillot today with all of you, I am sure. In this evening, we are dealing with the subjects that included both aspects. The lectures seem to deal with the physical health, but their main message concerns the human spirit, the values of the people of Israel, and their power to overcome various physical conditions. אני מקווה שיהיה לכם ערב מעשיר, ערב מעניין. תודה רבה לכולכם ותוכנית נעימה. נאחל לכם גם חודש טוב ופורים שמח.
Thank you, Esther, for your beautiful words in both languages. Halavai, my Hebrew was as good as your English. Okay, so Esther mentioned that the theme of the evening is healing in Holocaust body and soul, and we picked it this year for reasons that I think are obvious to everybody in the universe. I do want to mention that this year's event is dedicated to the wonderful men and women of the medical profession. Doctors, nurses, therapists, lab workers, researchers, the secretaries at Kupat Cholim who have to deal with all the phone calls for the vaccination appointments, everybody in the medical profession, they've all worked so hard under very tough conditions, under stressful conditions, and sometimes they've even risked their own health. And so tonight we salute them all. If you want to do this virtually or just join me, everybody, thumbs up for our medical professionals or clap for them, okay? It's on Zoom, we have to make it interactive in different ways, which reminds me to say something very important now. I love interactivity. I love talking to people. I hate muting people, but in malasot, as they say in Israel, you can't do that on Zoom. So here's what we want to do. If you have a comment, if you have a question, if you have a story of your own that you want to share, please share it on the chat. If you're not that comfortable with the chat, you can send it to the English department email, which is on the invitation. After the evening, in the next few days, I will have a copy of all those comments, and to the extent possible, the new semester starts in a few days, I'm not going to be able to give individual replies, but I will reply in a general way. I'll post some of the things that you have to say, and we'll put it on Michlallah's website so that we feel that we're hearing from you as well. Okay, now, as soon as I thought about the topic of healing, I thought about a story of my mother, Alaa Shalom, a story she used to tell us about the night when she met two doctors. And I was going to tell you the story, but I was looking through all her written stuff. My mother wrote a lot about her experiences. And I found an article, which I kind of had forgotten about, where she tells her own story about the night she met the two doctors. And this is not a plug, but it was in Family First for Mishpacha magazine. So it was, I write for Mishpacha, and this was years before. And I didn't even know that my mother was a columnist for Family First before her daughters were. Okay, so I'm going to read the article to you. So these are my mother's words. This is my mother's story. In the hospital in Auschwitz, quote, I was rushed to Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem recently after suffering a heart attack, and I spent some time there fighting for my life. Baruch Hashem, I survived, and after 2 weeks, I left the hospital. Although the hospital is understaffed and my time in the cardiac ward wasn't easy, the doctors and nurses all worked very hard, and with Hashem's help, they saved many lives, including mine. I had a lot of time in the hospital to think back on my God-given long life and my memories, both good and bad, and I reminded myself of a different hospital that I checked into in October 1944, another hospital visit that I survived. The hospital was situated in Auschwitz and was called the Revier. After working some time shoveling coal as a slave laborer in Auschwitz, I woke up one morning with an infected, swollen leg, and I reported to the block nurse that I did not think that I would be able to go to work. So she took me to this so-called hospital, a different kind of place, where instead of healing people, they would select people to be killed. In the Revier, I was introduced to the woman who would be my doctor. She was not Jewish, and I recognized from her accent that she was Russian. So I told her in that language that my name was Rosa, and I showed her my infected foot. I will clear out your infection today and discharge you tomorrow because this is not a place for a Jewish woman to be, she said to me. After the operation, sedated as I was, I fell into a deep sleep. In my dream, I heard someone knocking at the window. It was my mother with her Aunt Shanel behind her, both carrying the kind of blankets that the Nazis issued to those sent to die, al Kiddush Hashem. They, together with the rest of my precious family, had been killed the first night when we arrived in Auschwitz. In my dream, my mother told me, Reisi, listen carefully to what I am telling you. Tomorrow, when you face the German, smile. My great Aunt Shandel repeated, do not forget what your mother said. Smile tomorrow at the German. In the middle of the night, we were woken up. The lights turned on and in walked Dr. Mengele, the one we all called the Malach-HaMavis, the angel of death. The Russian doctor lady was on one side of him, the block nurse on the other. From my upper bunk bed, I carefully watched what was happening. The patients were each called to face them, according to the ABC, and as my name started with S, I had time to see what was going on. As each woman stood before Dr. Mengele, the first thing he asked was, is this woman Jewish? If the answer was no, she was sent back to her bed, no matter what condition she was in. But if she was a Jew, he looked at her very carefully, and if in his opinion she was unable to work, he pointed with his thumb out, let out a short whistle, ordered a blanket for her shoulders, and sent her to a corner to await the crematorium. Finally, I was called. My heart was beating loudly as I jumped off the top bunk to show how healthy I was. I looked straight in his eyes. What is wrong with this woman, he asked. I noticed that he did not ask if I was Jewish. With a big smile, I answered in German. I had a little infection on my foot, but the good doctor, here I pointed to the Russian woman, cleaned it out and I am all better. And I smiled as hard as I could, remembering my mother's words. Back to your bed, ordered Dr. Mengele. And so I was saved from the clutches of the angel of death, the Malach-HaMavis of Auschwitz. I lived to leave that hospital thanks to an unnamed Russian non-Jewish doctor, thanks to my mother's warning, and of course, thanks to God's mercy. That mercy allowed me to survive the war, to start a new life, and to start new generations of frum Jews who, Baruch Hashem, are continuing in the ways of my parents, the ways of Torah and Emunah. My mother's words, I can't do better than that. Okay. Just one thing I just want to mention, and then we will get to our next speaker. I wasn't sure whether to read the entire story, because tonight we are showing our gratitude and our admiration for the medical professionals of today. I said, do I even want to mention Dr. Mengele Yimach Shemo in such an evening? Then I decided yes, because this is the kind of evening that we try to have. We do not whitewash anything. We do not hide the horrors. We don't forget the evil. But the focus of our evening, as the focus of my mother's article is, as the focus of the way she raised her children is not on the evil and not on the horrors. It's on the heroism and the strength in this story of an unnamed doctor who could have told Dr. Mengele that my mother was Jewish, who might not have warned my mother to try to get out of there as fast as she can, who helped save my mother. So we're going to focus on the good. without forgetting the evil. Okay, so our first speaker is Dr. Yoel Eisenberg. Are you there? Okay, as Dr. Yoel Eisenberg. Okay, our first speaker is Dr. Yoel Eisenberg, who I thought was going to be speaking from down the block because he's my neighbor in Beit Shemesh, but he got caught in his with his patient, so he didn't make it back in time. So you're speaking to us from Netanya?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Eisenberg is in some ways combines the history of the Holocaust with contemporary medical issues because he is a child of survivors and he's also a senior physician and geriatrician at Shaarei Tzedek Hospital. So I'm just going to ask Dr. Eisenberg a few questions just to get us into both sides of the topic. So Yoel, can you just briefly tell us a little bit about your parents and their experience in the Holocaust?
My parents, I'll keep it brief. My parents are both from Rodham, Poland. My mother escaped early in September 1939 when the Nazis invaded. She escaped eastwards, and as she found a place of refuge in the Soviet Union, she had to keep on running as the Nazis kept on invading and conquering more and more Russian territory in the course of the war. She ended up in the Ural Mountains, where she worked as a seamstress 7 days a week. And after a 12-hour shift, she would take care of wounded Russian soldiers, of which there were millions. My father remained behind in Rodham initially because he was the oldest son still living in Rodham, and his mother was widowed. After 2 years, he ended up, he never till his death really shared very many details about this, but he ended up in what was at the time a forced labor camp called Belzec. He managed to escape. He ended up in the Soviet Union, where they treated him and other Jews as a potential fifth column. Jews in Poland were considered to be potential collaborators with the Nazis, ymach shmam, and he ended up in the Red Army way in the rear in the Arctic Ocean. They reunited at the end of the war, made their way through Poland ever so briefly, and then went to Stuttgart, where they awaited a visa to Canada, and that's where I was born. Okay, thank you. And I remember your parents very, very fondly. Yoel and I have been neighbors for, it's going about 27 years now, so. Okay, so Yoel, tell us about your choice to become a doctor. Did being a child of survivors affect that decision, do you think? Well, I'll go back before I talk about my decision. There's an old discussion in religious and philosophical and theological levels. We have a bechira, but yet everything is known. Certainly HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows everything in the future, the past and the present are all the same to him. So the dilemma is if HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows the future and the past, how can we have a choice? Because it's already known to him what is going to end up occurring. Well, my mother was nifteret about 2.5 years ago. She is certainly up there right next to the Kisei HaKavod, as is my father. And she knows a little secret about this. So I'll just share one incident. I was 2 years old in Montreal, Canada, and my mother was an immigrant. My father was working, as he always did, very, very long days and long hours in the bakery. And the phone rang. A person at the other end asked if he could speak to Dr. Eisenberg. So my mother said, without blinking, I just changed his diaper. So that tells you that my mother did see the future. I tried to fight this gezerah and try to exercise my free will. I succeeded for about 25 years, and I finally succumbed to my mother's predictions that I would end up in medicine. There may be many reasons for that, but the fact that I ended up in geriatric medicine, I have to say, in addition to the humanistic and the scientific and the clinical challenges, is undoubtedly influenced by the fact that I never had grandparents growing up. One grandparent of mine died a biological death before the war. The other 3 were killed in the war. And not having grandparents sensitized me to elderly people. And I have been blessed with the opportunity to be involved in geriatric care. And it has certainly been a privilege to witness people like Mrs. Rose Stark, Alea Shalom, who I was privileged to know, people like my parents, and countless other survivors who have been an incredible inspiration, sometimes a very, very daunting experience when one encounters people who have been through such indescribable hardships.
Thank you. You actually predicted my next question, which was going to be about your choice of geriatrics. As a geriatrician, you do work with many survivors. And since obviously the theme this year was picked because of the whole Corona, can you tell us a little bit about, from your firsthand knowledge of Holocaust survivors, how is Corona impacting on them? Is it any different for them than it is for the rest of us?
Unfortunately, and very, very, very sad to say, I have heard survivors say that those who are alone, who are most probably widowed and are in isolation, are terribly affected. One such survivor actually told me that not being able to see any of her family or to see anybody really made her feel she was back in Auschwitz. Wow. I'm quoting her, and we certainly have no right to comment or question, but it's a very graphic expression of the anguish of those who are in isolation. Many other survivors are luckier. They may have spouses, children, they may have extended family, they may live in communities or care facilities where they do have human contact. I must say that I still see many survivors both in the emergency room in Shaare Zedek and in house calls where I'm in active practice. And I'm struck by the fact that many of them to this day, and even after 11 months of this terrible and deadly pandemic, many of them continue to display this most extraordinary and inspiring resilience. And this is something that to me is a particular gift to be able to witness, to have a front row seat in people who survived Auschwitz or survived all the other horrors of the Holocaust and managed to come out intact, managed to come out looking forward without any resources, get married or get remarried, start a family, build a home, put together some parnassah, and raise the next generation. This is something that has always completely dumbfounded me. And many of these people still show this resilience in the face of the Corona epidemic that has caused so much sickness and so much death.
Thank you, Yoel. And I'm sure that the sensitivity that you learned as a child of survivors from your wonderful, wonderful parents goes far in making you the wonderful doctor you are, who is giving comfort as well as care to all your patients, but particularly to the survivors. So, Yashikaya. I just have to say one thing, Yoel. When we first moved to Beit Shemesh and the Eisenbergs lived down the block from us, he's a doctor, right? So if a kid had an ear, ache or I had a headache, you'd go to Yoel and say, do you remember this? You'd say, so Yoel, what should I do about my headache or my kid's earache? And
I say, come back in 80 years.
You say, take 2 aspirin and come back in 20 years. Well, it's 20 years, so.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share this. And we should all continue to gain inspiration from those survivors we have known in person and all their legacy and the writing and the stories we hear from all possible avenues. So thank you for allowing me to share that.
Thank you very much. Yashikaya. Okay. First of all, this is Zoom. Everybody stretch a little, move a little, right? Healthcare workers will tell you, you shouldn't sit too long. Okay, because now is one of the moments that we've all been waiting for, right? Rabbi Paysach Krohn is going to speak, and this is such a privilege and such a miracle. I mean, with all our problems with Zoom and our Zoom fatigue. It is really a miracle that we can have a speaker of Rabbi Krohn's caliber speaking to all of us all over the world. I was almost tempted to say, if you have not heard of Rabbi Krohn, raise your hand, and to show how nobody's going to raise their hand. Not a lot of hands would go up, because through his books, especially the Maggid series, through his lectures all over the world, and many of which are available online, his learning programs, he is one of the most well-known voices of inspiration of our time. And it is a pleasure and a privilege to hear him speak. So Rabbi Krohn.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how honored I am, Dr. Michlalah-Jerusalem, to have received a call from you to ask to participate in this Heilige program. I know your sister, Miriam Zakon. I've worked with her many, many times. Had no idea she was your twin sister. And she tells me that if I speak to you, it's like speaking to her. You're so identical. So I don't know if you're Miriam Zakon or Michlalah, but whoever you are, I thank you. And your mother must have been so special to produce such wonderful daughters. Everybody enjoys their writing. For me personally, to be here, and as I mentioned before, to speak in the presence of Dr. Rosenwasser, I just look at her and I see her mother 50 years ago when I first came to Eretz Yisrael as a teenager, and her Heilige father, Rabbi Yehuda, Zechet Tzadik V'Kodesh Lavracha, who was such a Talmud Chacham and who was so beloved by my Rebbe, Rab David Cohen, and of course, right here in my dining room, I have his Meshach.
Lunch?
I'm sorry? And to speak in her presence is just wonderful. I thank again, of course, Yossi Klein for the great technological genius that he is, and I know that we are going to be able to gain from his expertise just in a few moments. The topic that I have chosen to speak about is called the spark in the Jewish spirit. And this is something that is so dear to my heart. Although, Baruch Hashem, I do not have parents or grandparents that were in the Holocaust, but I have been to Poland more than 10 times. I have led tours there many, many times. By now, it's over 1,000 people that I've taken to Majdanek and to Auschwitz and to Lublin and to Lezhensk. And I would like to begin tonight's program, at least for my part, with telling all of you about something that we do on the first day when we go with Project Masora and my dear friend Ari Sharf, and we come to Warsaw. And Yossi, if you could please show the first picture of the evening of a place called the Umschlagplatz. Now, I get the chills and almost cry when I see this picture. This place, as you are looking at it now, was a train station. And as you see here, the people are being gathered together. Umschlagplatz means a place where they are gathered. And Rachmana litzlan, over 250,000 Yidden were transported from this very place, most of them to Treblinka, and of course, most of them lost their lives. Now, after the war, Poland did not want to have a zecher of this place at all. And so they knocked down these buildings that you see here, and they knocked down the train tracks, and you can't even tell that it's a train station. And Yossi, I would just ask you to show now the brilliant memorial that was made in this place. And I want to show all of you something that I talk about. Now, if you can see, there are names, endless, endless names on this wall. Now, what they did, the person who thought of this memorial, there were, as I said, over 250,000 people. Every name was recorded. So if among those 250,000, there were, let's say, 500 people named David, you've got the name David there. If there were 700 women named Devorah, you've got the name Devorah. Every name that you could possibly think of, from A till Z, is on that wall. I gather all the people here in the late afternoon, and I say to them, I want every one of you to find your name on this wall. And 99 out of 100 will find their name, whether they have a Yiddish name like Fagel or Heshi or Herschel, whatever, it's all on that wall. And I say to everyone as we stand there, and I get the chills again as I tell it to you, I say, you know that the Rebbe Rabbi Elimelech says that when you name a child after someone, the neshamas are connected. The neshama of the baby is connected to the neshama of the one he's named for. And it occurred to me as I was writing this thought when I wrote the book on Bris Milah for Art Scroll, that the word neshama, what are the two middle letters of the word neshama? Shem, shin mem. So your name is connected to the person who carried that name. So I say to all the people, our names, and my name Paysach, and my middle name Yosef, of course, is there. Why? Their names are there. Those are people, they died. Why did Hashem allow us to live and we come to this memorial? And I tell every single one of them the same answer. I tell them a story about Rab Michal ber Weissmandel. Rab Michal ber Weissmandel was a great tzaddik, and he Nebuch lost 5 children in the war. He came to America, he came to Mount Kisco, and he had 5 more children. The 5th one was a boy. And listen to what he said at the bris. They say that when the Satmar Rebbe heard this comment, he cried. And he said like this, I had 5 children and they died al Kiddush Hashem. I hope that the 5 children that I have now here in America will live al Kiddush Hashem. And listen to what he said. Now I have a new pshat in the Kedusha that we say when we repeat the Shemoneh Esrei. When we repeat Shachris and Mincha, the Chazar Sashatz, listen to these words. Nekadesh eshimcha ba'olam. We should sanctify Hashem's name in this world. Kishem shemagdishim oisei b'shmei marayim. Just like those who are in heaven, just like they sanctified Hashem's name. V'karo ze'el zevi omar. They'll be able to look at us and we look at them and we say, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. We look at the Kadoshim and we say they died al Kiddush Hashem. They have to be able to look at us and say that we are living al Kiddush Hashem. And that's what I tell all the people in the Umschlagplatz. Those people whose names are on the walls, those are our names. But Hashem asked them to die al Kiddush Hashem. But Hashem is asking us to live al Kiddush Hashem. So v'karo ze'el zevi omar, that we can look at them and they will look at us and say, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. That's exactly, thank you, Yossi, for showing it again. We see these names and we know those are our names, but we have the good fortune of being tested to live al Kiddush Hashem. How exactly do we do that? So I want to share with you a brilliant thought for Rav Shimon Schwab, Zechat Tzadik Livracha. He speaks about chinuch, and he says like this. There are 2 types of chinuch. They go side by side. One is v'higarat olavincha. We all, Baruch Hashem, who have children and grandchildren, we teach our children. We teach in our homes, we teach them Chumash, Gemara, Musar, Halacha, whatever. But then there's another way of teaching, and that's the other part of chinuch. And that emanates, he writes, from our example to impress our children so that what we do, they will learn from, and that's Laman Yedu Dereseichem. So there's 2 parts. There's the actual teaching, Vigarat Olavincha, and then there is what they hear and see what we do, Laman Yedu Dereseichem, so that the generations should know. Rachmana litzlan, all those people that we spoke about, Rose Stark's whole family, and the people that Dr. Eisenberg spoke about, and all those that we saw now went to Treblinka, most of them could not be Makayim Vigarat Olavincha, because either they were separated from their children or they were killed before they had children. But every one of them, as we will see in a moment, are teaching us Laman Yedu Dereseichem, because they are our role models. What about that person, that teenage boy who gave up his ration of food just so that he should be able to wear tefillin for a few seconds? There was a fellow in one of the camps that had tefillin and he used it as barter so that anybody who wanted to put on tefillin, even for a few seconds, had to give him the food. And now I'm writing a sefer. It's being dedicated by the Hertz family. And they're dedicating it to a grandfather, Mr. Weinberger, who lived in Toronto, Akiva Weinberger. And he, as a child, gave his food so he could put on tefillin for a few seconds. That's L'man Yedu D'Raseichem. Did it ever occur to you that a fork has 4 prongs? Think about that. People in the camps would take 2 forks and get a little wick and put it on top of each prong of the fork so that they could have 8 wicks for Hanukkah. That's L'man Yedu D'Raseichem. And what about those people who had some flour? They were able to get some flour and made something that looked like a matzah. That's L'man Yedu D'Raseichem. That's the example for all of us. And that's how we live with Kedusha. Now, I want to tell you a fabulous, fabulous insight that I heard from Rabbi Matisyahu Salman soll sein gesund and stark. Rabbi Matisyahu Chaim ben Etel should have a refuah shlema. The Pasuk tells us we all remember this dramatic moment when Yaakov Avinu finds out that his son Yosef is alive. He thought his son Yosef was dead 22 years. Vayome Yisrael, the Pasuk tells us in Bereshis Mem Hey Kov Ches, Rav, Rav, I have so much simcha. Oy Yosef b'ni chai, my son Yosef is alive. Elcha ve'erenu b'terem amos. Let me go and see him before I die. So Rashi says, what is Rav? Oy simcha v'chedva, I have so much simcha. Rav means in abundance. That's why a Rebbe is called a Rav, because he knows so much. But Rav Matisyahu pointed out, look how the Medrash understands Rav in a different way. Of course, Rashi is right what he says, but there's a different pshat. The Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah Tzadik Dalet Gimel says, Rav, Koichesh Yosef. Yosef is greater than me. Shekamat Tzoros Higiu, V'adayin Hu Omed B'Tzidkai. He had so much tzoros with his brothers, with Potiphera, with Paroi, and Adayin Omed B'Tzidkai Rav. He's much greater than I am. I can never be as great as him. Let me go see this child before I die. And when we come to Majdanek and we stand in the beginning of the concentration camp, I say to everyone, we are going to see the grave sites and the barracks and the crematoriums of those people that were Rav, that were greater than we could ever hope to be. You know why? Because they, Adayin Omed B'Tzidkam, they had so much tzoros, and yet they were Omed in their tzidkis. Now, with the brilliance of Yossi Klein, we are going to see now something that is so special. And I give this out to everyone. And I know that there are more than 400 people on this Zoom conference. And I just want to tell you, every one of you will be able to get this, which I am able to talk about, which I will show you in a moment. You know, there was a man who wrote a letter. His name was Rabbi Levi Weiss. He lived in Washington Heights. He lives still today there. And he wrote the Rav, Rabbi Yisrael Mantel, a letter. And he said, I want you to know that there was just found in the papers of a woman, Mrs. Irma Weiss, who was 96 years old, living in Washington Heights, and made Aliyah with her sister. And when she passed away, her niece, Judy Marcus, found among her papers the most incredible tefillah that a very Choshev Rav, Rabbi Yisocha Davids, who was the chief Rav of Rotterdam, he made up this tefillah. Let's look at it together. He was in Bergen-Belsen, and it was before Paysach, and he knew that the people would have to eat chametz. And so he wrote out the tefillah. We had a copy of the original, and of course I printed it, and all of you can write me at krohnmail@gmail, and I will send it to you. And I suggest people should keep it on their Seder table. Look at this tefillah. We'll read it in Hebrew and in English. And this is the Mesiras Nefesh that he had and the people in Bergen-Belsen had. Lifnei achilas chometz yoyme bekavonas halev. Say it with kavona. Ovinu shebashamayim, our Father in heaven. Kol v'yadu lefanecha. You know sheretzoneinu lasos v'tzoincha. We want to do your will. We want to eat matzah. We don't want to eat chametz. But Nebuch, our heart is broken. You know why? Because of our enslavement. It restrains us. We have found in sakona. We are ready to be makayim the mitzvah of a chai b'hem. We should live, and not that we should die. And we want to be careful. You told us that we should watch our souls. Therefore, Al Kain, listen to this. Tefillah seinu. This is our tefillah. You should keep us alive. Or let us exist. Usagolenu and redeem us. We should be able to serve you. This is the tefillah that those people that were Rav, that's what they said before they ate chametz. And I tell people, keep it on your Seder table. Show the kinderlach, show your grandchildren. Mitzvah Hashem will get back to these type of Siddur where we won't have to be alone. And show them how fortunate we are that we live in free countries, whether it's America and Eretz Yisrael and Canada, England, Tunisia, wherever people are watching tonight. All over. Just know, keep this tefillah. I have it printed in the Haggadah that I wrote last year that again is being reprinted, Baruch Hashem, by Art Scroll. But the idea is that's what's Rav. That's L'man Yedu Derasechem. That's what we take from the spark of the Jewish spirit. Imagine a Rav should make up a tefillah like this, not in desperation, not in despair, but with simchas ha-mitzvah. That's the Jewish spirit in all circumstances. Now, as I told you, I've gone many, many times to Majdanek and to Auschwitz. And I remember that one year, a woman who I will always be grateful for, she gave me a bracha before I left New York. And she said to me something that struck me so. I couldn't get over it. She said to me, may you be the voice for those who are now silent. You tell over what they would say if they could speak today. I tell you, I was so moved by that achrayus of feeling that responsibility. And when I stood in Birkenau outside the crematorium, and we had over 100 people with us, and I said, this lady is so right. What would they tell us? What would they want us to hear? And I thought about it. And I said, you know what I think they would want us to hear? A story that happened with my brother, Allah Shalom. I have a brother, Rabbi Yisrael Kalman ben Avram Zelik, who passed away 2 years ago. He was a tremendous tzaddik. And he didn't look like I look. He had a beard, a shtickle payas. He looked like the real deal. Anyhow, he was in Eretz Yisrael, and he comes into a cab. The Israeli cab driver was not from. He was wearing an earring, an open shirt with a necklace and all. And my brother wasn't afraid of the devil. He could say anything to anyone. And he turns to this Israeli cab driver as they started driving, and he says to him, Ono Achim, we're brothers. So the cab driver looks at my brother, and he says, Anachnu lo Achim, we're not brothers. Ata dati v'ani lo dati. And you're religious, and I'm not religious. We're not brothers. So my brother says, I don't know. I had a teacher who taught us that all Jews are brothers, religious, not religious. So the driver says to my brother, who was your teacher? Who taught you that? So my brother says, Adolf Hitler. The guy lost control of the cab. My brother thought they were going to get into an accident. He pulled over to the side. He was so stunned by that comment. He said, you're 1 in a million. And my brother said, no, I'm 2 in a million because Ono Achim, because we're brothers. And I think that's the lesson they who were burned in Birkenau would want us to know. We are all brothers. We are all sisters. Mengele didn't choose who was religious and who was not religious. It made no difference. We're Yidden, we're brothers, we're sisters, we're in it together. That's what the silent ones would want us to hear. Love each other, care for each other, especially in this time of COVID, as Dr. Eisenberg said. Rahman al-Islam, what a comment that somebody should say that it's being like in Auschwitz. Why shouldn't we call them, speak to them, make them feel they're still part of Klal Yisrael? That's our achrayus, to feel the achtos, that we're all in it, broken even in a difficult time. Now, I want to tell you something. I know that later on somebody's going to be speaking about the Kloisenberger Rebbe, but there were two things that I want to tell you about the Kloisenberger Rebbe. And one is so pertinent to me personally, as you will see in a moment. We know that the Heilige Rebbe Nebuch lost a wife and 11 children. And yet he built so much here in America and, of course, in Eretz Yisrael. And people asked him, how'd you do that? And he made a comment that we say at a bris. And that's why, to me, it's personal, because I say this kamat every day. B'damayi chayi, in their blood they shall live. And people are wondering, what do you mean b'damayi chayi? What's it got to do with what the question? What the question was, how did you survive? How did you build? But the Rebbe explained, b'damayich doesn't only mean in your blood. We remember Rachmana litzlan when Aaron HaKohen lost his children. What does the Torah tell us? Vayidaim Aaron. Aaron was quiet. That's the pshat. B'damayich, in the quietness, chayi, he lived. That's what the Rebbe meant. Of course, you could focus on the negative and then be locked in your position and never grow. But b'damayich, he didn't focus on the negative. He focused on the positive, what he could do in the future. Whatever happened in the past happened for whatever reason, as we'll speak about it in a moment. But when you're quiet and you don't focus on the negative, oh, chayi, then you can build. That's exactly what the Rebbe said. Now, I'm going to tell you a Gemara that in my life, I would never have the nerve or the courage to say such a thing unless it's a Gemara, and it is in Bava Basra, Tez Zayin Amud Aleph. But it teaches us a very, very powerful lesson. The Gemara says, we all know Eof had a lot of tzaras, terrible. So Eof, again, look it up. I'm telling you, I can't even say it out of my mouth without quoting the Gemara. The Gemara is in Bava Basra, Tez Zayin Amud Aleph. Eof says to Rabbi Shalom, Shema Ruach Sa'ara Avra Lefanecha, maybe like a whirlwind got over you and you got mixed up. You don't know how to spell my name, Eof Oyev. I'm not your enemy. What, you got mixed up? You don't know how to spell my name? I'm your friend, not your enemy. How could you make so much tzaras? My name is Eof, not Oyev. So what does Hashem tell him? Listen to what Hashem answers him. Eof Lamed Ches Pasuk Daled. Eifo hayisa b'yos lioretz. Where were you when I created this world? Haged, you tell me, Im Yodati Bina, if you're so smart. In other words, Hashem has a master plan. If you're not around from the beginning of the world to the end of time, we have no way of understanding anything. I'll tell you a very painful story that happened with me. Those of you who know me personally know that when I was 21, my father, Olav Shalom, passed away. I'm the oldest of 7 children. My father, Nebuchadnezzar Machla. And I was terrified because I knew that if he passes away, I have to leave yeshiva and I will have to support my mother and my younger brothers and sisters. I just want to tell you, Mrs. Rosenwasser, your brother-in-law Yitzchak Kopperman came from Ireland, and my father was one of the ones who taught him Milah. I don't know if you know that, but he moved into our home. He lived in our home for a little while, and he still remembers those days fondly. So what happened was I would have to take over for my father all the show. And my father had been a Talmud of Rab Schwab when Rab Schwab was in Baltimore. And now my father was in a hospital in Washington Heights. And my brother, Rab Kalman, and I were in Washington Heights for Shabbos. We came back from the hospital after we had davened in the shul, in the Kehillah. And when I came to the Suda, Rab Schwab said to me, so how's your father? And I said, I have betochen that he'll be well. And he got so stern with me. He said, betochen does not mean that your father's going to get well. I almost fainted. Here, I'm a kid. I'm 21. I'm hoping beyond hope that my father's going to get better. And this Gadol Hador is telling me, doesn't mean that your father's going to be well. He said, you know what betochen means? Betochen means that God has a master plan. You have faith that God knows what he's doing. Hashem knows what he's doing. And someday maybe you'll understand it. And that's why we keep on with that spirit. The spirit of the Jewish soul is to know that Hashem knows what he's doing. Is there anybody that can understand COVID? Anybody who says they know why COVID happened, you have to daven for him and daven, in his mother's name. Nobody knows. Only Yirmiyah, Yecheskel, Yeshaya Hanavi, they can tell us. But we have to respond. We have to go on. Life is a test, no question about it. So we know that Hashem has a master plan, and hopefully one day we'll be able to understand it. And that's exactly what Hashem was saying to Eov. And so I just want to say one more story, and we'll end with a great thought. How much time do I have left, Rebbetzin? Dr. Zitter?
Oh, we got smicha. That's great.
What?
Okay. 5-6 minutes. But
okay, good. I'll get them both in quickly.
The last one to try to stop you in your stories.
Okay, no. I'll tell you these two great stories, and with that we'll close. I remember I once met a man from Baltimore. I had been told that he had relatives in Queens, and I met him. And he told me the most fascinating story. I had heard it about him, but you know that I never tell a story, or at least I don't try to write a story until I speak to the people involved. Now, when he was 15 years old, he was in a DP camp, displaced persons camp, and the Kloisenberger Rebbe was there. He had lost his family, he had lost everybody. And he wasn't wearing tzitzis, he wasn't davening, he wasn't wearing his yarmulke. And people went over to the Kloisenberger Rebbe and they said, Rebbe, you got to talk to this boy. He came from a very frum family. And nobody was able to reach him. So the Rebbe said, tell him that I'd like to see him. Now, he told me, I mean, he was a man who was close to 70, 75, 80 when he told me the story. He said, I knew what the Rebbe would want from me. I decided I'm not going to talk to him. I'm just going to answer one-word questions. I came inside, and the Rebbe looks at me and he says, oh, I knew your tata. Your tata was Michlalah? I said, yeah. I didn't look at him. I just said, yeah. So the Rebbe said, I heard that you used to be a masmid, very diligent in your studies. He said, I just looked down. I said, yeah. I didn't want to get into any discussion because I knew what he would want. And then he said something to me that I wasn't expecting. He looked at me and he said, you're angry, right? Oh, boy. I looked up. I said, yeah. The Rebbe said to me, I know why you're angry, because I know exactly what you feel. You feel exactly as I do. They took the best ones and they left us. They took the best ones and they left us. And the Rebbe started crying and he put his head on this boy's shoulder and he started crying uncontrollably. And the boy started crying as well. He couldn't stop. The Rebbe and him were crying for 25 minutes. And all the Rebbe was saying, they took the best ones and they left us. After 25 minutes, the Rebbe kissed him on his head and he said, come whenever you want. And he left. And that night, the person told me he learned Krishma for the first time in weeks. And the next morning, he put on his tzitzis. And I said to him, what was the difference? What did the Rebbe say? Listen to what he said. He said, everybody spoke to my head. The Rebbe spoke to my heart. And that's what Yiddishkeit is all about. And that's what this topic is all about. The spark in the Jewish spirit. The spark is the Yiddish hearts. The Rebbe didn't have to say anything. He just had to show him that he cared, that he understood why he was so angry. Because he and the Rebbe had gone through the same Gehenna. And he became an Erlich Yid, lived in Baltimore until he passed away. And now I just want to end with this story. One of the greatest things that ever happened to me. And again, Yossi, if you could please show, I once was in Hungary and I was along the Danube River. Look at this. This could break your heart. Let me show you what this is. Thank you, Yossi, for this great picture. What this is that the Germans, Yamach Shemam, the Hungarians, also the Rushayim, they lined up people along the Danube River and they shot them into the water. But what those Rushayim did was that they tied two Yidden together so that when they would fall into the water, they couldn't swim because they were tied to each other. And that's how they drowned. And some genius person made this memorial. You can go there, go online, say, look up shoes along the Danube River. You'll see shoes of children, of grandchildren, of parents and grandparents, men's shoes and ladies' shoes. And I came there, I was speechless. Look at that. It's just the most saddest memorial I've ever seen. And all I could do when I came back to America, I spoke about this memorial of those shoes. And then you'll never believe. Then Rosh Hashanah, I was davening in my shul. I'm not the Rav of my shul, but I daven near the front of the shul. My Birchas Koyanim, after Birchas Koyanim, I picked up my talis and I saw empty shoes. I saw shoes of parents, shoes of grandparents, shoes of little kids that had taken off their shoes to Duchen. And I was reminded of these shoes along the Danube River. And when I spoke in shul on Yom Kippur by Yiska, I always give the Yiska drasha. I said, Rabbi Paysach, the shoes in our shul reminded me of the shuls along the Danube River. Except what's the difference? Those shoes will never be filled. It's our obligation to fill those shoes and to live al Kiddush Hashem. We have to become the Mahalchim Bein Ha'imdim. We have to become those who walk among those who can no longer walk. The Mahalchim Bein Ha'imdim. That's our role in this world. That's why we have these Heilige programs. And we cannot thank Dr. Zitter and Michlalah and Dr. Rosenwasser enough for keeping on these programs. Not only L'Zeicha Nishmas, your Heilige Mother, but L'Zeicha Nishmas, all the Kedoshim. Because as we keep saying, they died al Kiddush Hashem. But our Nisayan is to live al Kiddush Hashem, to fill those shoes. And if we can be a Mahalach, and we can learn from them, then Chazal say, they are no longer Aimdim. They are also climbing, going up the stairs in higher madrigas. You know why? Because we are learning from them. Again, Dr. Zitter, I cannot thank you enough for allowing me to speak on this Heilige program. All of us should be able to be inspired together. We should be Mahalchim Bein Ha'imdim. We should continue to be able to go with Freilich HaHerz Ba'achtos and see Mashiach in our time.
Amen. And wow, thank you. And forgive me if I shouldn't put it this way, but Yibdel Chaim for you. Like the Kloisenberger who spoke to the heart of that young boy who then became a nice pro man in Baltimore, you have, I think, spoken to the hearts of everybody here. And I think it's not just our Paysach will be different now from Paysach when we think about that tefillah and maybe actually have it at the Paysach Seder. But I think every time I hear Kedusha, my Kedusha, and that's a lot more than once a year, will be different when I think about Karez El Zeva Amar. Beautiful. You were a very eloquent speaker for those who could no longer speak for themselves. And thank you.
That's the best comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay, and we go now. We segue easily because Rabbi Krohn introduced the Klosenberger Rebbe with a couple of stories. Well, I'll tell you what happened. Okay, we had the first meeting that we had with the staff of the Center for Holocaust Studies about this year's event. And I said, you know, it's COVID. We have to face that. And we said, we'll do it in honor of the medical professionals. And we said, let's talk about healers. And suddenly it was a Zoom meeting. Everybody on Zoom was talking at the same time. And they're all saying, oh, we'll talk about the Klosenberger Rebbe. You can't have an evening like this without bringing up the Klosenberger, and why that is. I will ask Shira Schmidt. Is Shira there? And Shira, are you there and ready?
Yes.
Okay, so Shira Schmidt writes for Ami magazine, and she does research on the Holocaust. And I'm going to throw a few questions now to Shira, and then she will answer them all using her PowerPoint. Okay, I want to find out from Shira, first of all, what your connection, your specific connection is to the Sans Klosenberger Hasidic community. You had an intriguing title for your talk, Nightmare, Dream, and Reality. So you're going to give us a sense of the nightmare, right, behind the story. You will share with us what the dream was, and also how did that reality, what was the reality and how it came about. So Shira, I give you the stage.
Yossi, just tell me, where's the icon? I live here in Kiryat Sanz because my husband, Dr. Baruch Schmidt, was drafted to start the Department of Surgery. My husband here with the mustache, he's the handsome Hulk showing the Klausenberger Rebbe around the Department of Surgery, and he insisted that even he's a Rebbe, but still he has to put on a hospital coat and cover his shoes, and then he would show him around the operating room. So that's why I live here in Kiryat Sanz. First, I'll start with a nightmare, go into the dream, and then explain how he brought the dream to reality. Rabbi Yekutiel Yehuda Halberstam was born into the Sanz dynasty. That's here in southern Poland, number one. He was asked to be the Rebbe in the city of Kloisenberg, number two. That's why he's called Sanz Kloisenberg. In 1944, when the Germans invaded Romania, he was taken to Auschwitz. In the course of the Shoah, all 11 children and his wife, Pessel Teitelbaum, died. He was then taken to Warsaw. From Warsaw, that's number four. Number five, taken to Dachau, concentration camp near Dachau, and liberated, and eventually spent a year in Fernwald in a DP camp, a displaced person camp. The nightmare, the worst part of the nightmare was that he lost all 5 sons, and the second line you see is 6 daughters, and his wife Pessel Teitelbaum. This is a memorial to them in the yeshiva in Kiryat Sanz. During the Shoah, he was shot, he was bleeding, and he took some leaves, put them on his arm with some vines to staunch the bleeding. And then he said, and this is in a film which you can see in his own words, he said, then I swore that if Hashem granted me life and I got well, I'll build a hospital in Eretz Yisrael. And here you can see the Rebbe at the cornerstone laying in Kiryat Sanz in the 1960s. When he was liberated, he didn't have time to mourn his wife and 11 children because he had to get to work to help to rehabilitate the young men, the young women who survived. He built yeshivas, workshops, a Beis Yaakov, medical centers. And here's a picture of one of the yeshivas that he built in Fernwald in the DP camp. But most unusual was the attention that he lavished on the girls, which was very unusual for a Hasidic Rebbe, highly unusual. And here you see the girls at one of the Beit Yaakovs that he set up. I personally researched this. I found the actual place where this took place. And here you see in the front, circled in blue, is Edith Weiss, mother of Rav Osher Weiss, one of the Gedolim in Jerusalem. Each of these women became learned, and many of them mothers of great scholars. We're going to see 2 of these women, Edith Weiss and one of the other women, in the next slide. Here you see Edith Weiss again, much later, and Fegi. And we see here the daughter of the Rebbe. Now the Rebbe remarried and had 2 sons and 5 daughters. The one son became, when the Rebbe passed away in 1994, one son became the Rebbe in Netanya, and one is the Rebbe in Brooklyn. This is one of the daughters, one of those 5 daughters from his second marriage. You see that she wears a tichel. The shita of Sanz is that married women wear a tichel. They don't wear wigs. However, in these DP camps with these girls who barely survived, were orphaned, had their hair shaved off, they wanted to look nice. So he personally bought each of them, when they got married, a wig. And here you see the 3 Telowitz sisters with those kind of curly, cute wigs that he got for them in the DP camp. Now, Mrs. Telowitz the young woman on the left, she passed away half a year ago. I interviewed her. She personally told me that the Rebbe took a great interest in the girls. On the first Rosh Hashanah, he made sure he gave every girl a machzor and a bar of chocolate. Yom Kippur, he benched the girls because they were orphans. They had no parents to bench them. I have this in the testimony that I personally took. And here you see that here Edith Weiss and her friend who were in that previous picture, they are still wearing shaitels. That shows the practical approach where the Rebbe didn't insist on his chumras to insist on them for other people. Now, he came to Israel in the 1960s. He knew that if he's going to build a hospital, he has to talk to the head honchos. And here's the head honcho of the head honchos, Prime Minister Ben-Gurion. And there's an urban legend that teaches us something about the sense of humor of the Rebbe. Ben-Gurion said to the Rebbe, how do you envision the future of these Hasidim in Israel? The Rebbe said, I see the minimum and the maximum. The minimum is that I can walk on a Shabbos in my strimal, my white socks, my kapota, my whole regalia, and no one will do me any harm. They'll say, good Shabbos. Silence. And Ben-Gurion said, and what's the maximum? The maximum is I see you, Ben-Gurion, in a strimal. That's an urban legend, but it does indicate his sense of humor and his practicality. Eventually, he was able to set up the hospital, and the most important thing for him was to set up the maternity ward. In 1976, the first two babies were born. Here you see a newspaper clipping of these first two babies. I interviewed Shula Krohn, the mother of one of those babies, and here's the baby. She told me that the Rebbe made two requests. One, that they named the baby Yekutiel after him. Now this is, Shula is Yemenite, her husband's Yemenite, so that's okay for them. They name after living people. So this is little Yekutiel Cohen. And the second request was that when the baby will be born, to put the receiver near the baby so the Rebbe could hear the cry. When he heard that cry, he himself started to cry. And then he started to dance and to clap. And he said, this is my revenge. This is how Jews confront adversity. They build families. When the two boys were bar mitzvah, Laniado Hospital made for them bar mitzvah, and Yekutiel Cohen is now a rabbi in the city north of Netanya, and his friend Farhi also lives around here. One of the most important departments for the Rebbe was the maternity. This is a photograph of the hospital, which is grown now, and the maternity ward is so popular that women come from the north, from Haifa, from Kiryat Shmona, from Beersheba, even from Jerusalem, where you have plenty of good hospitals, but they prefer the extra care that is given in Laniado. The maternity and the children's department are both dedicated to the memory of the 1.5 children who were murdered in the Shoah. I have to emphasize that Laniado Hospital, the staff and the patients come from the Muslim, Christians, Jews, religious, non-religious, Israelis, tourists. It serves everybody. And here we see a proud father of triplets that were recently born. These triplets are among the over 150,000 babies that have been born in Laniado Hospital. We also have a corona department. This is from a film that was made recently for Israeli television. It shows the corona ward, and the caption that the Israeli TV put on it was, "There is no such thing as sitting down. We don't sit down here," said the staff in the corona ward. That reminds me of a story that my husband, Dr. Schmidt, told. He was once asked to take care of the Rebbe. The Rebbe wasn't feeling well. He goes to the office of the Rebbe. He sees the Rebbe sitting, and his foot is propped up on a chair. My husband says, "Well, what's wrong?" He says, "I'm angry." I'm furious. I'm brogues with my feet. Why is the Rebbe brogues angry with his feet? They're not doing what I want them to do. I have so much I want to accomplish, and they're not cooperating. Well, my husband fixed up the foot, so the Rebbe went on to do much more even than the hospital, built yeshivas, kollels, girls' school, a junior college, old folks' home, a orphanage, all of this in Kiryat Sanz. And his motto was, you could take his motto as this caption here, there's no such thing as sitting down. We don't sit down here. There's a film about the Rebbe, a 1-hour film that you can, in the States, you can rent it from Go-To Films, I'll put it in the chat. And in Israel, you can watch it free by Googling Astir Panay, or contact me. I'll put my email in the chat. And in the summer, I'll, God willing, I'll be doing a film tour with this film in the States, either by Zoom or in person. So you can contact me for more details. So just to recapitulate, for the Klausenberger Rebbe, there's no such thing as sitting down. We don't sit down here. And here's my husband, Dr. Schmidt.
Okay, thank you, Shira. Wow. Yossi, are we, okay. First of all, Shira and Dr. Schmidt, nice to meet you. Wow. I have to say, that picture of the triplets, speaking as a grandmother who has not seen her grandchildren enough this year, and also a picture goes straight to the heart. When you're talking about the Rebbe's special interest in the maternity ward and the bracha he gave to the first babies born there, and the amount, Kain Yerbu of babies born there, I thought about another doctor who we're going to meet, so to speak, in the film that's coming up, because we're about to start our final topic of the evening, which is about the 7 children born in Dachau. I don't want to give away the whole film, but there is a doctor there who delivered 7 babies of Dachau. His name is Dr. Vadash. And there's a quote that they say he said, too many Jewish children were killed. These must live. So that was in 1945 in Dachau. The Rebbe went on to bring life for the 1.5 million who were killed. It's just incredible and moving, and thank you very much, Shira. Now, before we get to the last topic, first of all, again, stretch, move, right? Don't sit too long. I opened up this evening with thank yous to the Chushava audience, but there's a lot more thank yous I want to just give quickly now. First of all, of course, to Michlalah-Jerusalem and for their support for our event every year. And in particular to Machal girls. I had hoped to be able to be in the auditorium with them. Technical problems had happened, so I wasn't. I miss you girls, you're fabulous. We had an anonymous donor who wants to remain anonymous, who helped defray some of our costs, and you know who you are, and thank you. Esther Farbstein and Dorit Tepperberg and the whole staff of the Center for Holocaust Studies, they are part of the heart and soul of this evening. Yossi Klein, we know there would be no evening with Rabbi Paysach Krohn is clapping. You don't know the half of it. I'm not one of your great technical people, and Yossi is incredibly patient, and he's been incredible. Rachel Emanuel, who I saw before, translated the film. Shmuel Aram Holtz happens to be my grandson. Did a little editing, and he subtitled the films. My daughter is Malka Holtz. Malka Holtz is an example of where the apple falls very far from the tree, because I'm very not technical, and Malka is a Zoom consultant. And she's also my therapist when it came to consulting for my Zoom. So Malka, thank you, and thank my whole family for their patience all through as I organize this event. And finally, and last and very much not least, is Dini Goldstaff. Dini, I assume you're out there somewhere. My secretary, my assistant, my best friend. who did a huge amount of work, and much of it for the last 2 weeks when she was quarantined at home with all her children, right? And she would work at night when the kids were quiet and when she could were sleeping and she could get a little quiet and get a little computer. Okay, we're about to watch a film. I will tell you right now, it's got some intense portions to it. So have your tissues handy. Let me just say a word about languages. Okay, in the English department, we're very used to multiple languages. In the English department of Michlalah, we train English teachers for Israel. We have English speakers, we have Hebrew speakers. And in fact, we have German speakers, Dutch speakers, Russian speakers, Amharic speakers, French speakers. We run the gamut. So we're used to multilingual stuff. The film itself has a certain multilingual feel to it. And that's because the film was made originally in German, and the filmmaker, Eva, oh, I'm sorry, what's her last name? Eva, I have it written down, hold on. Eva.
Gruberova.
Say again?
Gruberova.
Okay.
Eva Gruberova.
Gruberov, I'm sorry, I have it written down here. Eva Gruberov is in the audience. So it was made originally in German. It's a documentary, and the people speak all sorts of languages. You'll hear Yiddish, you'll hear Hungarian, you'll hear German, you'll even hear some English. It's completely subtitled in English, so don't worry about that. Once in a while, it was subtitled on top of Hebrew, so once you even get a drop of Hebrew in there once in a while. And in the background, there is a German voice translating as well. Don't worry about it, because it's a very powerful film, and the real language it speaks is the language of the heart. You will be touched, moved, and it's an incredible film. And when we finish, stay with me, because we have some very special guests when the film is done. Okay, so Yossi, are you ready to set the film up? Okay, join us. Okay.
Ich habe lange gedacht, dass ich in einem Wald geboren wurde. Was für ein Ort das genau war, wusste ich nicht. Ich wusste nur, dass man dort Menschen gequält hat. Dass man sie ins Gas geschickt hat, aber vorstellen konnte ich mir das nicht. Eva Fleischmanova hat ihrer Tochter Marika lange nicht erzählen können, wo sie zur Welt brachte. Wie konntest du mich überhaupt ernähren? Ich sehe so gut aus auf dem Foto. Ich habe dich gestillt und sogar noch Milch für die anderen Babys gehabt. Als ich nach Hause kam, hat mir keiner geglaubt, dass Marika mein Baby ist, dass sie im Konzentrationslager geboren wurde. Die Leute haben gehört, dass alle Juden vergast worden sind. Und ich habe nicht einmal Papiere gehabt, um meine Tochter anzumelden. Es kommen noch mehr Juden zurück, als überhaupt weggebracht worden sind. Das haben wir uns anhören müssen. Ich habe nie darüber gesprochen. Nicht einmal vor dem Kind. Ich konnte es einfach nicht. Meine Eltern und Geschwister sind ja dort geblieben. Nur eine Schwester hat überlebt. Bei anderen Kindern stand in der Geburtsurkunde Dunajska Streda oder Bratislava. Bei mir Kaufering in Deutschland. Warum? Und wenn es einmal Streit gab in der Schule, dann beschimpften mich sogar meine Freundinnen, und das waren sehr gute Freundinnen, als stinkige Jüdin. Die Fotos, aufgenommen nach der Befreiung, hat vor Jahren Miriam Rosenthal aus Kanada geschickt.
Auch sie hatte im KZ ein Kind geboren. Wie war das möglich? Die Geschichte ihrer Geburt hat Marika seitdem nicht mehr losgelassen. Jetzt, als Rentnerin, sucht sie auf ihre vielen Fragen Antworten, die ihr ihre Mutter nicht geben konnte. Ich habe das schon gewusst. Meine Schwägerin hatte mir geraten, ich solle mir das Baby wegmachen lassen. Aber es war schon zu spät. Und mein Mann Gesa wollte das nicht zulassen. Evas Transport endet in Auschwitz. Dort ist schon Miriam Rosenthal. Auch sie ist schwanger, weiß es aber noch nicht. Miriam stammt aus einem jüdisch-orthodoxen Elternhaus, in dem Deutsch und Ungarisch gesprochen wird. Erst seit 3 Monaten ist sie verheiratet mit Bela Rosenthal. Die beiden wurden getrennt. Er kam in ein Arbeitslager, sie nach Auschwitz.
Schnell, wohin? Wir gehen unter den Schauer. Ja, desinfiziert, schrecklich. Und die haben angefangen zu lachen, die SS. Weil die junge Mädel war schön, aber die ältere Frauen mit dem großen Bauch und Brust, und sie haben gelacht. Schau dir an, schau.
Ich habe 2-mal vor Mengele gestanden und bin durchgekommen. Er hat mich in die Brüste gezwickt, ob ich schon Milch habe. Er muss etwas geahnt haben. Vielleicht waren meine Brüste ja schon etwas größer geworden.
Marikas Mutter Eva hofft, dass ihre Schwangerschaft unentdeckt bleibt. Wie soll sie ihr ungeborenes Kind schützen? In Auschwitz, der größten Tötungsfabrik der Nationalsozialisten.
Könnte ich weinen.
Marika ist allein hierher gekommen. Eva, ihre Mutter, wollte und konnte sie an diesen Ort nicht begleiten.
Im Grunde war ich schon einmal in Auschwitz, noch als ungeborenes Kind. Deshalb bin ich jetzt hierher gefahren, weil es auch meine Geschichte ist.
Im Archiv des Museums Auschwitz-Birkenau hilft die Historikerin Helena Kubica Marika bei der Spurensuche.
Ihre schwangere Mutter hatte ganz großes Glück gehabt, dass sie der Gaskammer entkommen ist. Hier habe ich Dokumente über 5 andere schwangere Jüdinnen. Sie waren zur gleichen Zeit in Auschwitz wie ihre Mutter und wurden in ein Außenlager des Konzentrationslagers Buchenwald gebracht, ins Arbeitslager Altendorf. Dort wurde ihre Schwangerschaft entdeckt. Alle 5 Frauen hat man mit einem Transport zurück nach Auschwitz deportiert und ermordet.
Warum haben wir überlebt? Marika sucht weiter nach Antworten. Sie erfährt, dass ihre Mutter Eva nach 5 Tagen Auschwitz in ein anderes Lager verschleppt wird. Nach Krakau-Plaszow, wo sie Steine schleppen und Straßen planieren muss. Eva lebt in ständiger Angst, dass ihre Schwangerschaft entdeckt wird.
Mein Kleid war mir schon zu eng. Und da haben die anderen zu mir gesagt, Frag doch die Aufseherin, ob du ein anderes bekommen kannst. Stattdessen gab sie mir eine solche Ohrfeige. Später habe ich mein Kleid mit einer anderen Frau getauscht. Ich habe immer versucht, meinen Bauch zu verstecken.
Ich habe etwas gefühlt. So, der war eine ältere Frau und sage ich, vielleicht glauben Sie, dass ich war mit meinem Mann 3 Monate, vielleicht bin ich, ja, das kann sein. Und sie ist gegangen zu Elsa, der Lagerälteste, zu sagen. Und sie ist gekommen zu mir. Nicht ein Wort, das du sollst sagen. Nicht ein Wort. Schweig. Weil du willst gehen in die Krematoria.
Musste ihre Mutter am 6. August 1944 zurück nach Auschwitz-Birkenau. In dem Transport ist auch Miriam. Zurück zu den Gaskammern und Krematorien. Die 2 Frauen kennen sich noch nicht. Beide sind guter Hoffnung und voller Angst.
Auf einmal kommt ein SS mit einem großen Lautspeaker. Alle schwangere Frauen heraus, bekommt doppelte Portionen. Oh, jeder war so, wir bekommen doppelt. Und mein little Cousin, alle gehen schon vor, und ich war die Letzte. Und ich sage zu meiner little Cousin, du weißt, ich gehe nicht. Aber du bist so hungrig, du willst bekommen doppelte Portionen. No, ich gehe nicht. Ich gehe nicht. Etwas sagt mir, vielleicht meine Mutter sagt mir, geh nicht. Ich bin nicht gegangen. Und vielleicht da war 200 Frauen und alle gegangen in das Krematorium.
Die Alliierten rücken näher und das Deutsche Reich braucht immer mehr Arbeitskräfte für die Rüstungsindustrie. Anfang September 1944 sitzen Eva und Miriam, die immer noch nichts voneinander wissen, schon wieder im gleichen Transport. Wohin es geht, erfahren sie nicht. Hauptsache weg aus Auschwitz. Sie sind im 4. und 5. Monat schwanger. In den Augsburger Michelwerken sollen sie Flugzeugteile montieren. Der Wettlauf mit der Zeit beginnt. Wie lange können sie ihre Schwangerschaft noch verstecken?
In Augsburg, das war schon ein bisschen besser wie Auschwitz. Wir haben bekommen mehr zu essen, ja. Und ich habe gearbeitet bei der Dreherei.
Die Frauen können sich im Fabrikgebäude duschen, bekommen saubere Kleidung und dürfen ihre Haare wieder wachsen lassen. Marikas Mutter hat hier wieder Mut gefasst und gehofft, sich und ihr Kind doch noch irgendwie durchzubringen.
Denn der SS kam ein Tag, der 2 SS, und sagt, wo sind die schwangeren Frauen? Wo sind die schwangeren Frauen? Natürlich, ich war Angst. Und ich sage, du Schweinehund, du kommst mit uns nach Auschwitz. Alle die Mädchen, nicht alle, die waren 500 Mädchen, haben sie angefangen zu weinen. Miriam, was wird passiert mit dir? Was wird passiert? Ich bin gegangen mit den 2 SS. Es war Winter. Sehr, sehr kalt. Ich hab nichts angehabt, nur das Kleid. Und es sehr Schnee. Und die 2 SS sind herausgegangen. Das war ein Zug, ein Passenger-Zug, wie ein normaler Zug. Und die 2 SS sind herausgegangen. Wir sind zurückgekommen. Wir haben eine sehr gute, was ist das, News für dich. Auschwitz ist bombed bei den Russen und du musst schon nicht zurück, sagt der eine SS. Aber wohin gehen? Du willst gehen zu einem Lager, es heißt Kaufering. Das ist ein Straflager.
Eva ist jetzt im 7. Monat. Auch ihre Schwangerschaft wird Ende November 1944 von der SS entdeckt und auch sie wird nach Kaufering I gebracht, einem Außenlager des Konzentrationslagers Dachau. Rund um den kleinen bayerischen Ort Kaufering existieren 11 solcher Nebenlager. 30.000 Häftlinge sind hier eingesperrt. Die meisten sind Juden. Jeder zweite stirbt. In einer dunklen Erdhütte lernen Eva und Miriam sich nun endlich kennen. 5 Monate lang sind sie durch die Hölle gegangen. 5 Monate haben sie, ohne es zu wissen, dasselbe Schicksal miteinander geteilt.
Es war sehr finster, nur eine Bulb. Wer ist hier? Wie sprichst du? Du bist ungarisch? Ja, die Frauen, die haben geschrien, geweint. Und was? Wo warst du? Was ist passiert? Wir sind 7 Frauen hier, ja. Und was werden wir sind schwanger. Wir haben angefangen zu weinen und geweint. Und eine die andere, wir waren so auf einmal wie Schwestern. Wir haben niemanden. Und we hugged each other. We kissed each other.
Something must have changed.
Nach 3 Tagen dürfen die Hochschwangeren in eine Holzbaracke umziehen. Ein jüdischer Häftling, ein ungarischer Frauenarzt, soll bei der Entbindung helfen.
Er ist hereingekommen mit den SS. Der Mann, Dr. Vadas, from Nyíregyháza, from Hungary. Er war ein Gynecologist in Nyíregyháza. Und hat uns gesehen, alle 7 Frauen mit dem großen Bauch. Was will ich machen? Er hat angefangen zu weinen wie ein Kind. Ich habe gar nichts. Ich habe gar nichts zu helfen. Ich habe nicht Instrumente. Heißes Wasser. Ich brauche heißes Wasser. Ich habe gar nichts.
Am 8. Dezember 1944 kommt inmitten des Grauens das erste Baby zur Welt. Es ist ein Junge. Seine Mutter Böji, die älteste der 7 Frauen, wird Dr. Vadas bei den weiteren 6 Geburten helfen.
It was indescribable. After all that death.
Es war unbeschreiblich. In diesem Elend, in diesem Sterben, plötzlich ein neues Leben. Und das an diesem Ort. Noch heute, nach 65 Jahren, ist es für mich sehr schwer, dieses Gefühl zu beschreiben.
Und ich war die Letzte. Dr. Vadas, ich bin schon so müde, ich weiß nicht, was wird passiert. Ich kann nicht hören schon die Herz from the baby. Miriam, push. Du musst helfen, weil ich kann das nicht allein. Er will sterben, Ich kann nicht, Dr. Vadas. I can't, I have no more strength. Miriam, please try. Try. Böschi hat mich gehalten. Und er sagt, ich weiß nicht, was zu machen mit dir. Du bist die Einzige von allen die 7 Frauen, dass ich habe Schwierigkeit. This is the letzte Situation, was ich kann machen jetzt. Er hat sich an mich gelegt. Und er hat mich mit den Händen. Oh, Vielleicht jetzt ist calm, jetzt, vielleicht, push. Hab schon nicht. Und auf einmal ist der Baby heraus, er kommt. Eine Schönheit mit blonde, beautiful Haare und große blaue Augen. Und die Frauen haben geweint. Und Dr. Vadas hat geweint. Und jeder eine hat geweint. Und es kommt herein. Na, hat die Frau schon das Kind gehabt? Ja. Ah, er ist der Aryan. Schau mal an, die blauen Augen und die goldenen Haare. Was hast du für einen Mann? Ein SS? Ich sage, nein, nicht. Ich habe meinen Mann. Ich weiß nicht, wo mein Mann ist. Ich habe meinen Mann, nicht von meinem SS.
Im Lager herrscht Typhus. Im März 1945 will die SS die Frauen mit ihren Säuglingen nach Bergen-Belsen deportieren. Zum Sterben. Dazu kommt es in den Wirren der letzten Kriegswochen nicht mehr. Die US-Truppen haben bereits den Rhein überschritten. Am 26. April 1945 wird das Lager Kaufering I überstürzt geräumt. Mehrere hundert Häftlinge müssen auf den Todesmarsch. Auch die 7 Mütter mit ihren Babys.
Wer nicht weitergehen konnte, wurde auf der Stelle erschossen. Die Menschen waren krank und abgemagert, völlig kraftlos. Ohne Schuhe mussten wir zu einem Zug marschieren.
Wir marschieren zu dem Waggon. Und neben mir war der Soldier mit dem großen Hund und sagt er zu mir in Deutsch, du sprichst Deutsch? Ja. Gib mir das Kind. Ich habe es nicht geglaubt. Ein SS, gib mir das Kind. Sie sehen, dass in diesem Leben sind gute Menschen auch. Die waren SS, aber er hat ein Herz. Er hat ein Herz und er hat das Kind genommen. Es war sehr schwer zu gehen. Es war der Schnee und ich konnte schon nicht gehen. Ich werde ihn tragen. Und ich habe Leslie, ich habe zu ihm gesprochen. Wir gehen nach Hause und Gott will helfen. Und der Vater und meine Mutter. Please God, help me.
Am 28. April 1945 erreicht der Zug mit den Häftlingen Dachau. Eva und Miriam wissen nicht, dass nur noch ein Tag sie von der Freiheit trennt. Am nächsten Morgen, einem Sonntag, müssen die Häftlinge in Dachau noch einmal antreten. Der letzte Appell. Auch die Mütter mit ihren Babys, 3 Jungen und 4 Mädchen, werden gezählt. Einige Stunden später wird Dachau als eines der letzten Konzentrationslager von amerikanischen Soldaten befreit.
Die Menschen became ganz blöd, die waren so geschrien. Wir sind frei, bei Nacht, wir sind frei. Jeder ist gelaufen wie ein Crazy, herausgegangen. You see, Americans. Und die American Soldiers, die sehen ein Kind und noch ein Kind. Der Officer, der high-ranking American Officer, hat angefangen zu weinen. Er hat geweint wie ein Kind. Das ist das erste Kind, wir sehen.
Marika und Leslie, Susi, Agnes und Judith, Juri und Jossi, sie werden zum Lieblingsmotiv der US-Fotografen. 7 jüdische Babys inmitten des Mordens. Es ist wie ein Wunder. Die befreiten Mütter sollen im bayerischen Kloster St. Ottilien wieder zu Kräften kommen. Aber Eva und Miriam wollen sofort nach Hause.
Die Miriam hat nicht genug Milch gehabt und die Eva hat so viel gehabt, dass sie auch Miriams Kind gestillt hat.
Auch Miriams Mann Bela hat überlebt. Von einer Verwandten erfährt er die unglaubliche Nachricht. Seine Frau lebt und sie kommt nicht allein zurück.
Sie hat Bela getroffen, mein Mann, und erzählt, dass deine Frau ist. Das. No, das ist nicht meine Frau, wir haben nicht Kind gehabt. Er hat nicht, das in 3 Monaten, Frau became pregnant, ja? Er hat nicht einmal gedacht an das. No, das ist unmöglich, das ist unmöglich. Ja, ich habe sie gesehen, das Kind schaut so aus wie du. Blond, beautiful, blue eyes. Mein Mann sagt, no, ich muss gehen. Ich bin spaziert mit das Kind auf der Straße. Ich sehe jemand. No, das ist Bela. Das ist mein Mann. Ich habe geschrien, Bela, Bela. Er ist mein Kind. Er ist mein Kind. Das ist ein Kind. Er schaut so wie du. Dass sie können dies nicht vorstellen. Die Freude. Der hat gesehen, sein Kind.
Nach Kriegsende wandert Miriam Rosenthal mit ihrem Mann Bela und ihrem Sohn nach Kanada aus. Der kleine Leslie wächst in Toronto auf, als gläubiger orthodoxer Jude.
Viele Holocaust-Überlebende hatten nach ihrer Rückkehr den Glauben an Gott verloren. Aber meine Mutter sagte, ich habe überlebt und bin mit einem Baby zurückgekommen. Wie kann ich nicht an Gott glauben?
Wow. Everybody still with me there? I have seen this film, at least it must be 10 times, and I have not seen it once without crying, especially at the end when Miriam and Bela meet again, and Bela meets Leslie. And now I would like you to meet our very special guest, our last speaker of the evening, Yossi. People, meet Leslie, Akiva Chaim Rosenthal, that beautiful baby who is now grown up, possibly the youngest, yeah, I have my tissues too, possibly the youngest survivor of the camps. You were the youngest of the 7 babies.
Yeah, the youngest. I was born on February 28th, the last of the 7 babies.
Extraordinary. I just have to say something personal here. Every time I see your mother, I think of mine. I'm sorry, you better talk because I'm going to get emotional here. She's so charming, as was my mother. I'm so moved when she says, and it's extraordinary, when she says that there are good people, and she's talking, which calls him the SS man who, can you say took pity on? I guess so. Maybe he had a baby and he just saw a baby and wanted to carry a baby. I don't know, but your mother saw good even there. So,
she said once that one of the Germans said to my mother that you reminded me of my daughter.
Really?
So he had some goodness in him.
My mother also saw the goodness wherever she could find it. There wasn't a lot of goodness in those years, but maybe that's one of the things that helped them survive and also helped them rebuild. Can you tell us a little bit about your mother? Did she talk about her experience to you a lot?
Well, you know, I was thinking back and trying to recall when it might have been the earliest time that she may have started this story. And you know, quite frankly, I don't think she may have started, you know, little snippets here and there, but you know, I have to confess, in 1981, there was an article written by, what's his name? Alan Gould. So he was a journalist in Toronto, and he wrote an article about the story. And actually, it was at that time when I read the story in print that the whole thing came together. Because up until that time, it was little bits and pieces here and there, but it was never all, it wasn't cohesive. And when he wrote that piece, it appeared in 1981 it was called the Toronto, what was it called? The Toronto Life magazine. And I remember he was telling me that he would not publish that in the magazine unless the magazine would not put any advertisements or anything to do with food or anything like that. He wanted this to be plain and stand out by itself. And when I read that article, that was the first time that I sort of put everything together. And that was, you know, sometimes you have to read about it to understand it.
I think that your experience, I think, is something a lot of we children, you're very interesting, Leslie, because you are both a survivor and a child of a survivor.
Yeah.
And I, as a child of a survivor, I understand what you're explaining there. We grew up in the atmosphere, in the air they were our parents. We didn't think of them as, survivors, but we picked up here and we picked up there. Did your mother speak publicly about her experience? Because she was a very powerful speaker. All I know is what I saw in this film, but she would wow an audience. Did she speak?
Yeah, she spoke when she was asked to speak. We had a situation where we were invited to New York. The Museum of Jewish Museum, Heritage Museum in New York was putting on a program in which they were inviting. Oh, sorry, they were talking about the people in the United States, in the U.S. who helped during the war effort, and they wanted my mother to speak at that program. And one of the highlights of that program, besides my mother speaking, was they were introducing Charlotte Cheney. Charlotte Cheney was a nurse who was 21 years old in 1945. That was one of the first medical people that came into the camp that deloused the 7 babies and other people as well. And on that stage, after so many years, they met for the first time after how many years that was it was just amazing. And during that period of time, my mother did speak a lot at that program, and it was very, very well received.
Wow. Now we didn't have the whole film. It's a much longer film. I had to cut out the last few minutes for technical reasons. Tell us a little bit about your children and grandchildren, the descendants of your extraordinary, both your parents. Obviously, your father was also a survivor, but your mother's the one we feel that we know now. So just tell us a little bit about her descendants. I know you have 2 sisters. I did not really properly. Mind if I call you Leslie?
Sure.
I feel so close to your family from this film. Leslie is also Dr. Akiva Chaim Rosenthal. He sent me after I did the flyer, so that's why I didn't put doctor on. He's got a doctorate and a postdoctorate in chemistry, and he's worked in engineering and also in research and development in all sorts of places. He's also one, and this will interest all you Toronto people, one of the you were in the first class, one of the first of 10 boys at Toronto's Ner Israel Yeshiva College. And I don't know if he's there, but I let Rabbi Gold know. All right, Rabbi Gold was the founder, so I let him know that you'll be here tonight. So Rabbi Gold, if you're there, be well. And the thing that got to me the most from it, I mean, we had a full page biography, but the 35 years that you've been doing Daf Yomi.
Yeah, that's wow. The highlight of the morning.
And it's this Dr. Vadash saved your mother and saved you and at least 7 children. Another one of the children is in our audience. That's Hannah Klein with a daughter of hers. Sorry, it's very hard on Zoom. You don't see people.
And George, I see George Legman is also on.
Who is that?
George Legman.
Oh, is he another one of the 7 children?
From Brazil. His mother, Birgi Legman, was the mother that nursed. She nursed practically all the children. My mother had no milk. She was very.
She was the first one to give birth, right?
Yes, yes.
They said that she helped with all the births after that.
That's exactly right.
Incidentally, Rachel Emanuel, you said Rigi, it's Bougie. The name, it's a very familiar name to us who have Hungarian parentage. So the hour is late, so we're going to start to wrap up. I still have one more thing, so no, there's 2 more things of interest. But I do want to ask you, Leslie, you just told before this started, you started to tell us the story about when all 7 of you babies, children from Dachau met. You want to just share that story?
Sure. As I mentioned to you, Eva Gruberova, who I'm not sure if she's on this or not, but she was a journalist that was doing some research on her, I think it was her grandfather, who was a political prisoner in Dachau in 1933, and she was doing some research on it. And during that point, she discovered a picture, which is the picture that you see on your brochure, and she was intrigued by that. And she decided to do some research on it, and one thing led to another, and she ended up getting in contact with my mother, and hence the film between Eva Fleischmanova and my mother got produced. And while she was in Toronto, I said, this is in 2008 or 2009, I told Eva, I said, wouldn't it be a good idea if all the 7 babies, if we would all reunite at the 65th commemoration of the liberation of Dachau in Dachau? And she took that and she worked on it and she arranged, and it became a reality. We all met in 2005 in Dachau and reunited for the first time after 65 years. And it was just an amazing time. And ever since that time, the 7 of us have been communicating with one another. And, I call them my camp brothers and sisters. That's who we are.
Wow. Well, you're actually all your brothers and sisters. You're also first cousins, because your mother spoke about all 7 women being sisters.
They were
sisters, cousins.
They call them the Schwanger. They were called the Schwanger Commander. The pregnant battalion.
Wow, wow. Now, 2 more things, and it is a late hour. Not in Toronto. You're just starting your day.
Yeah, still. Yeah.
But here, people are it's getting late. This is very important to me, because every year, I believe it's the 14th year and the 13th time we're doing this. One year I had to miss, but so this makes it our bar mitzvah year. I always mention the story about the Satmar Rebbe. I'm pretty sure it's a Satmar Rebbe, who he was leaving from America to Israel, and his Hasidim said, "Who will give us a bracha, Rebbe, if you're not there to give us a bracha?" And he said, "If you see a man with a number on his arm and he puts on tefillin, that man can give a bracha." And in all those years when my mother Alaa Shalom used to come, I would tell the story, or she would tell the story. My mother had a great sense of humor, and she would always say, "It's good enough for a man, it's good enough for a woman also." So and from there, we had the idea that a survivor, and I've heard this, a survivor who has stayed religious has a special capacity for giving a bracha. Now, Leslie, you don't have enough number on your arm, I assume. You're a baby survivor. You're a survivor. And so I would like you to honor us by giving us all, especially in this tough year that we've all been going through. Would you give us all a bracha?
You know, I'm really honored to have been asked to give a bracha to all who have joined this very special program. And it looks like there are over 400 people on this call. At first, I was reluctant to accept this honor. It is true that I was born in a concentration camp along with 6 other babies, but not having a number tattooed in my arm somehow lessened that qualification. However, the story of the 7 mothers bringing life into this world, where more than 1.5 million children were murdered, is a nes nigla, an open miracle. My mother, Olaha Shalom, whose 3rd yahrzeit was this past Sunday, was often approached to give a bracha, and so in her zechus, I am privileged to be able to share the following bracha taken from the Shabbat Mevorchim Tefillah that we read a few days ago. May Hashem give us long life, a life of peace, a life of goodness, a life of blessing, a life of sustenance, a life of physical health, a life in which there is fear of heaven and fear of sin, a life in which there is no shame or humiliation, a life of wealth and honor, a life in which we will have love of Torah and fear of heaven, a life in which our heartfelt requests will be fulfilled for the good. And lastly, one of the Yehirot sons said on Mondays and Thursdays, compiled by Rabbi Amram Gaon in the 9th century, especially now with the pandemic raging worldwide, may it be the will of Hashem to have mercy upon us and to keep destruction and plague away from us and from all of his people, the family of Israel. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. Okay, now, do you want to try something? Everybody want to try something? First of all, I can't even start to thank you, and I want to stay in touch with you, Leslie. I feel very close to the family. What can
it would be our pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so let me remind everybody, if you have comments and questions, you have a few more minutes to put on the chat, or you could send it to the English department email. Okay, are we going to have gallery view now, Yossi? Yossi, could you give us gallery view?
Dr. Emmy, one of the babies is in the audience, under the Hebrew name Aharonson. That's Hannah Klein. If maybe she can wave under the name. There she is, Aronson, wearing pink hat and a pink shirt. There she's waving.
Oh, look at that.
One of the babies.
Hi, Hannah.
It is beautiful to see you together. Be well. And
Hannah. And Marika from Slovakia.
Can we also get Ava, the filmmaker, who was also still here?
She had to leave. Ava had to leave.
Okay.
But she sent regards.
What I want to do now is something.
There's someone else from Slovakia in the audience.
I'm sorry, what?
Somebody else in the audience.
Who's also? Oh, well,
Maria. Maria Nabokov. Maria's over here.
With the red shirt.
Yeah, Maria, right.
Oh, Maria. Wait,
Hi.
You're in the film.
Yes.
Wow. You all of you have an incredible zchut, and you're giving an incredible legacy to your families and to everybody here who shared this. Wow, and I thank you all. What I want to do now is something a little different. I've never done this before. My Zoom experts told me it's an interesting way to end the evening. Yossi, can we get the gallery view so everybody sees all the little, lots of little boxes?
Olivia, with Olivia.
Okay, so everybody should be seeing boxes now, okay? Here's what we're going to try to do. See, when you're a teacher this year, you learn all sorts of fun stuff to do with Zoom. This isn't exactly fun. I'm going to do something symbolic so that we can all participate. Okay? What we're going to do, you're not going to leave. Okay? We're going to start out, and I'm not going to do it because I want to see what's going on. We're going to start out with everybody, if you can. If you can't, it's okay. Also, there's no test at the end. If you can, you're going to start out with everybody who's going to turn off the camera. So all we are going to see is blackness. And we are going to think about the Shoah, the blackest of the black years in the history of our people, the time of Hester Panim, when you couldn't see. Yeah, everybody turn out your cameras. Just ignore me because, as I said, I have to see what's going on. Okay, if you know how, turn up the camera. If you know how, it's okay also. And then, okay, out seeing lots of black boxes and think about the horror and the fear and the tragedy and all those children.
So I get like an above screen.
Okay, please mute, but
I don't know how to do it, obviously.
I don't know how to do it. It's okay. Imagine a black.
Do it.
Okay, so imagine all blackness. Okay. Now I would like to
finish them.
I would like to ask every survivor. Everybody hear this? Every survivor, every survivors, to put your camera back on, because the survivors brought light back to us and their children. Okay, and here's where I want to say something really important, and I'm glad there's lots of people still with me, because this I say every year, and I want this to become.
Can you repeat the instructions? We didn't hear.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, we call the people who survived survivors, and that's fine. That's the way it should be. They survived, and it's a miracle, an incredible miracle that they survived. But they did more than survive, and as they're getting older, I may have best room for all survivors, but they're going into history. And I think they should be remembered as more than just having survived. I think they should be called the rebuilders, because they rebuilt families, they rebuilt Torah institutions. They rebuilt our people, they rebuilt Eretz Yisrael and Medinat Yisrael. They are the rebuilder generation, the generation. They didn't just survive, they rebuilt. And guess what? No, I still need gallery view. Right? No, don't spotlight me. I need gallery view. Because here's the last thing I want you to do. Okay? Yossi, you with us? Yossi, I need gallery view because I want everyone to put their cameras back on. Everybody. Why am I seeing my grandchildren? I love them dearly, but I need the gallery view. Oh, here we go. Okay. Put your cameras back on. Because this is another thing I think it's important.
He's telling us that we can't go back on, and that you've taken us off.
That's
what he says. Whenever we want to start video, it's said you can't.
Okay, I don't know why. I'm sorry, but imagine now the light is coming from every one of us. Every one of us. Why? Because, in a sense, every one of you, right? Rabbi Krohn, you said you're not a child of survivors. You're a child of survivors. Every one of us, every Jew is a child of survivor. Why? Because Hitler, Yamach Shemo, was not going to just destroy the Jews of Europe. He's going to destroy every Jew in the entire world. So if you are a Jew and you are living a Jewish life, Hitler was like Haman, right? He was going to destroy all of them, like Amalek. He was going to destroy all of them. So if you are a Jew today, you are a descendant of a survivor, because the Jewish people have survived. And more than that, we're all rebuilders. We're all part of the rebuilding of our nation. When you learn Torah, 35 years of Daf Yomi, right? When you learn Torah, when you live a Jewish life, you raise a Jewish family, you build up the land in the state of Israel, you create and strengthen the Torah institution, you are rebuilding our people. And Be'ezrat Hashem, that is how we, each and every one of us, will be part of the ultimate rebuilding, the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, B'mheira B'yameinu.
Amen.
Amen. With that, I close the evening. Thank everybody.
Am Yisrael Chai.
Am
Yisrael Chai.
Thank you. Marsha, that was you?
That was me.
Thank you very much to everybody. It was a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Emmy, you did a great job, Emmy. It's
Thank
Debbie.
you, Emmy.
Kol hakavod. Beautiful.
My mother's
Kol hakavod. A beautiful evening.
Thank you, Emmy. Thank
Beautiful.
you so much.
Thank you, Emmy.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Special evening.
Beautiful evening.
Incredible.
Unbelievable.
so much. Yes, what to say. One more thing. This evening work because of my mother. Thank you. Oh, one more thing.
Emmy, an amazing job.
Stay well.
Nikki Beaton Jackson is on the Zoom, and she was with Miriam when they took Miriam away. She's on the Zoom. L051. Maybe she can just wave hello. Olivia Beaton Jackson.
The gold wants to say a few words.
Amazing. How are you?
Dr. Zitter.
For a minute, yes, everybody. Okay, Rabbi Gold is here.
Even we can't hear you.
Rabbi Gold is muted. He's muted. Unmute Rabbi Gold.
Can I say something?
I was deeply moved by this whole program. Of course, more than anything else, is the fact that our Kiva Chaim, Reb Leslie, was my first student in the yeshiva in Toronto. His parents lived then in Sudbury, Northern Ontario, and his father was so thrilled that somebody's opening up a yeshiva in Toronto that he can send him to. I didn't know anything about him until tonight. I didn't know this whole story. I don't know what would have been different if I would have known. I don't know. I was nice to him anyway. He was a good student. He was good. But more than anything else, I have a feeling that the most powerful response to the Holocaust is the birth of a Jewish child.
Nachon, correct.
Your brother's name is Miriam. It was Miriam who told her father Amram in Mitzrayim when they were throwing Jewish children into the Nile, you have to have children. That Miriam, that's what she said.
Correct.
And here it is.
May I say something?
I thought you were just another Kiva Chaim Rosenthal. You're not. You're not. You're a symbol of Jewish survival, growth, development, health, and the greatness of the Jewish people. Kiva Chaim, regards to all the boys here.
Emmy, Olivia wants to talk. Olivia wants to comment.
No, Shira.
Yes. Tell how you.
Shira, yeah. May I say something?
Yes.
May I say something?
Yes.
I want to say that when Miriam started to have a belly and it's getting bigger, she had a very narrow dress and she really was in trouble. So I gave her my dress, which was much bigger, and I took her dress so that her pregnancy was for a long time covered up because of my dress that was bigger. So I want you to know that was my contribution for the baby.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I was with
Miriam. Tell about the night when they took her away. Tell about the night they took her away to be killed.
That's right. We, the girls, were sitting in the room and saying Tehillim all night long because we didn't know what they're going to do to her. We thought that they're taking her to Auschwitz into the gas chamber. And we didn't know. We were praying that Hashem should help us, help her, that she should not be taken to the gas chambers. And she wasn't, because by the time the train approached Auschwitz, Auschwitz had been liberated by the Russians. So the train had to come back, and they brought her back to Kaufering. I know because I spoke to her about it. Anyway, she was brought back to Kaufering, and there in a dark room, among 6 more Hungarian Jewish women, she gave birth in that dark room with the help of Dr. Vadas. And Baruch Hashem, the baby survived, and we are here to celebrate Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem, indeed.
How did you meet up with her, Livia? How did you meet up with her?
It so happens, I went to Toronto from New York because my son moved to Toronto. He was working as a doctor there's a hospital in Toronto. I don't remember now what. So my husband and I, we went to visit him. And just as we got out of the subway line, there was a Hebrew bookstore. So I went in, I figured I'll bring them a present. I'll take them a Jewish book. And I went to the bookstore, and the woman who was serving behind the counter spoke with a Hungarian accent. And I asked her, "Are you Hungarian?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Where were you during the war?" She says, "I was in Augsburg." And then I looked at her and I recognized her, that this was Miriam. So I started to scream, and I said, "Miriam." And she recognized me, they called me Ellie. And she said, "Ellie," and we hugged each other and we started to cry. And her daughter, who was also working in the store, was very embarrassed that if a customer will come in and see the two of us standing and sobbing. So she took us in the back. They had a small room where she had a coffee machine. So she took us back there so we could cry. And we just kept crying. We couldn't stop, because now first of all, I thought that Miriam was taken to Auschwitz. She was pregnant, and the Germans were going to kill her in a gas chamber. And here I was meeting her, and the baby was alive, and the baby was a grown-up man. He also came to the store. I met him, and already at that time he had 4 children. I can't tell you what that meant to me.
Well, it would seem that the Tehillim that you girls said, the tefillot, the prayers that you said, were answered. And they were answered, yes. And tonight we see Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so I'm going to close the evening now with again, you know what? I'll say in the schus of my mother, I can also give a bracha. Everybody be well and stay well. And thank you so much for coming. Laila Tov to Israel. Have a good afternoon. Chutz la'aretz. I have no idea what time it is in Brazil, but everybody should be well.
Am Yisrael Chai!